Hello, everybody. Today we are going to be learning about the percent equation. The percent equation is part equals percent times the whole. We use the percent equation as kind of our quicker, shorter, everyday method because it's easier to use to calculate percents or parts or wholes versus using the percent proportion. Everything you guys learned about the percent proportion is correct and totally usable for you. However, most of us are not going to take the time out in the real world to set it up as a fraction out of 100. Instead, we're going to take a look at what's the shortcut you can do to be able to use your calculators if you're out shopping around or you need to figure out a tip, and you can whip that calculator out and calculate it real quickly. So what is the percent equation? Well, you can use the percent equation to work out the same types of problems we were solving before with the percent proportion. So percent equation is the same thing we do with percent proportion. All right, so again, the percent equation is part equals percent times whole. What makes, like I said, the difference of the percent equation to the percent proportion is the key thing, the word percent. Out in the real world, we're not going to write it as a percent out of 100. We can write it as a fraction of percents out of 100. However, most of us out in the real world are just going to use the decimal form. And in fact, we're going to be only using the decimal form for the percent when we go through and use the percent equation here in class. So let's recap. How do we change a percent to a decimal? Well, if you recall, to do a percent as a decimal, we are taking the percent and we are putting it as a fraction out of 100. When we put it as a fraction out of 100, that means that we are dividing by 100. And when we divide by 100, all that's really happening is we are shifting that decimal 2 places to the left. So that's kind of like the shortcut version of it, is just simply when you write your percent, you're going to write it as a decimal, and all you're going to do is shift your decimal 2 to the left. So taking a look here in your packet, we have 100% equals 1.00. So where did that come from? Well, technically your decimal right now is at the end of the number before the percent sign. So if I wanted to switch the decimal, I would have to shift it once, twice to the left. So when I shift it twice to the left, this is where my decimal ends. So 1.00. So if I was doing 90%, again, my decimal starts here, and I'm going to shift it once, and I'm going to shift it twice, which means that my decimal ends up here at 0.9. Now you could write it 0.9, or you can write it 0.90 like I have it on the paper. All right, so let's try 85%. My decimal right now is here, and I'm going to shift it once, and I'm going to shift it twice, and I would write that as 0.85, meaning 85 hundredths. And again, if you think of that hundredths, that's because all percents are out of 100. And all we're doing is converting it from a fraction out of 100 by shifting the decimal left 2 places. All right, so 77%. My decimal would be here. I shift it once, I shift it twice, and I get 0.77. All right, try the last one here on your own. All right, shift it once, shift it twice. and you should have came out to 0.23, pronounced 323 thousandths. Notice I didn't start my decimal here after the 3, and the reason why is because the decimal was already showing, and it was showing in between this 2 and 3. So wherever the decimal is where I'm moving it. In these problems, prior to this, we couldn't see the decimal. So if we don't write the decimal, that means it's at the end of the number, and that's why I was always starting from the end here. All right, so now that we're good at writing percents as decimals, we can start using the percent equation for us. So the percent equation probably might look a little familiar, not just from percent proportions, but instead from proportional relationships. So if you look at the setup, the part in the percent equation is in the same spot where the variable y in proportional relationships equations are. And in place of the percent in the proportional relationship equation, you should recognize the letter K as in the constant of proportionality. And for the last one, the whole, in the proportional relationship, the equation has the variable x. So y equals kx is the exact same thing as part equals percent times whole. And as you recall, we were just working on percent proportions, right? So if you think about those words, if we were just working on percent proportions, then that means that the percent equation is going to be the same equation as proportional relationships. All right, so another quick recap, some key words that are going to help you. First one is percent. The percent symbol, again, we are going to write either as a fraction out of 100 or as a decimal, shifting the decimal 2 spaces left to get it into decimal form. All right, there's the word is, and is represents the part, and of represents the whole. All right, so keep that in mind as we go on to our first example. The first example comes in finding a part. So I give you the problem, what number is 24% of 50? So one more time, what number is 24% of 50? So the first thing you're going to do is use the equation part equals percent times whole. Once you have your equation set up, now all you have to do is take the numbers out of the problem and put it in place of those words. So the first thing I'm going to do is find the part. Looking in the problem, it says what number is. Key word being is the part. When I don't know something and I ask what, that's the unknown. So in place of an unknown, we use a variable like x. So in place of the word part, I'm going to put the variable x. Equals. The next thing that I need to find is the percent. Percents are always easy to find because there is the wonderful percent sign. So here I can see that it is 24%. But please note, I am not going to fill in 24. I am going to fill in instead the decimal 0.24 because I shifted my decimal 2 spaces to the left. So again, I'm going to shift my decimal 1, 2 spaces, and that's where my decimal came in. So 0.24% times, The last thing is the whole. So the keyword for the whole, if you remember, was of. So at the end of the problem, I have of 50. So in place of the word whole, I'm going to put 50. All right, the last thing to do, step 3, is you just need to simplify it, aka solve the problem. So for here, I just need to take 0.24 times 50, punch that into my calculator, and you will get an answer of 12. So 24% of 50 is 12. 12 is 24% of 50. So the idea, as I was saying, out in the real world, we are going to not set up a percent proportion, but instead, that means that all I would have to do is pull out my calculator and punch in the calculator 0.24 times 50. That's fast. It's pretty simple and easy to do. And I would be able to maybe, if let's say that was my tip I wanted to leave. And 24% is a little big for a tip, but you might want to do it. So if your bill came and it said it was $50, you're going to leave it 24%, pull out your calculator, 0.24 times 50, boom. I need to leave $12 on the table for my tip. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at another example. So flip the page in your packet and let's take a look at example 2. The question is, what number is 53% of 125? So again, set up the equation, part equals percent times whole. Then you're going to start substituting, starting with the part. So I'm looking for keyword is, and in the problem I see what number is. That's an unknown what number, so I'm going to put in a variable like x. Equals. Now I need to find the percent. So again, I look back at my problem, I look for that percent sign, and I can see it right here, 53%. I am not going to write 53. I am going to write 53% as a decimal. So if I shift it 2 to the left, shift it 1, shift it 2, that means that I would have 0.53 times, now I need to find the whole, keyword being of. So I look back at the original problem, I see of 125. I'm going to replace that for the whole. And I have now my equation all set, ready to go. I move on to step 3, simplify to solve. So I'm going to use my calculator. I'm going to punch in 0.53 times 125. And I'm going to find out the answer is 66.25. So 66.25 is 53% of 125. So if I was to kind of like summarize this up as a quick shortcut of how do I find the percent of the whole out in the real world, simply all you would have to do is just take the percent and multiply it with the whole. Percent times the whole. And that will tell you the part. All right, so the next one. How do we find a percent? Meaning, like we usually do this in school with test scores, right? You know, I got a 18 out of 20. How good did I do on my quiz? What grade did I get? And we have you guys practice finding the percent. So here in our first example, example 3, I'm asking what 10.5 is what percent of 30? So we are still going to be using that setup of the equation, part equals percent times whole. But what's different this time is that we don't have the percent. We have the part and the whole. So I'm going to start with first finding the part.